Hello and welcome to Itsy Bitsy, the little podcast about childish things. I'm your host, Sienna Macaroni, and today I'm very excited to be speaking with Alva Calymayor, who is an artist who also runs a series of experimental bilingual art workshops for kids that she calls Art Experimentos. Hi, Alva!
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited to be chatting with you today about the work you do with Art Experimentos.
Thank you. I'm excited to meet you in like sort of real life.
No, same. I know. I don't even remember when I first started following you, but I feel like we've been mutuals for a while.
Yeah.
So before we get into all things Art Experimentos, I wanted to ask you where you grew up and what you were like as a kid.
Let's start with the stuff I know for sure, which is I was born in Mexico City and I grew up in Mexico City as well. I think I was like very quiet that I remember, but according to my mom, I was very chatty.
Mm.
So, I don't know. I also loved making everything out of paper and like pasting structures onto paper and yeah, like making a lot with very little.
Sounds like you've been an artist your whole life since the beginning.
Perhaps.
When did you move to the US?
I think probably almost 20 years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you spent like your early adulthood in Mexico City?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Interesting. Cool. And can you introduce the work that you do now as a grown-up with Art Experimentos and also as an artist?
Yeah, so I feel like somebody was just saying that I've lived many lives, and I guess so far probably that's true because when I first moved here, like I right away applied to like residency. So I'm essentially an artist, a practicing artist, and I'm also an arts educator. But I think the way that things like lined up was that I arrived here to study printmaking, and then I applied to a residency at the Bronx Museum, which I got. And I think based on the dynamics and the exercises on that residency is sort of how my career developed. It started with one of the assignments to do studio visits to the other artists. And I don't know, like studios tend to be lonely. And then it's only until you're invited or encouraged to do something that like these worlds open up to you. And then you feel the necessity of asking questions because it's part of the assignment. And then you just get in the practice of doing that. I know we always make fun of like when someone says they're a conceptual artist because they're like, oh, yeah, I'm a conceptual artist. But I think it's just the exploration of concepts and ideas that is like basically where my work and practice revolves around.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you how you would describe your own artistic practice.
I think it comes from questions. Like a lot of the times, there's certain experiences that make me question things. And depending on the question is that I look for the medium to approach it. It can be like paper pulp, paper mache, it can also be sound, like recording or performance. But I think it's mostly from being a curator and an artist that a lot of projects involve display of things or like the life of things.
And the concept determines the medium.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Would you say you've kind of always been interested in arts education, or did that kind of start at a specific point?
I think I started calling it like that recently because I think that all I've been doing for all these years is creating prompts and responding to prompts and games in a way that I didn't see them as such.
Mm.
And then as I started realizing that the dynamics of my work comes from collaborations, from like creating prompts for each other. I guess like I learned a lot from that of like being playful and like creating environments, make installations, and I think that's where it all started for me.
That's so cool. I mean, it sounds like you've kind of always had a collaborative practice a little bit.
Yeah.
How would you describe Art Experimentos in your own words?
Art experimentos, I guess, obviously, like experimentos is experimenting. Um, it's just obviously from the practice of coming up with like a theory, but it always comes from like playing and observing and creating something in like repetitive ways until you get to that like method. But a lot of the time it's just like messing around with things and not like really get hung up on the results.
So, what inspired you to start Art Experimentos, and how has the project evolved into what it is now?
So how it started is that I had a child back in the day, like well, he's 9,
Mm.
but back in the day, I started teaching in the kitchen of my Ridgewood apartment, and because a friend of mine was like, I really want you to teach classes to my kid, and then we started with one, and soon after it became like a larger group, and then pandemic came and all these people that I had built relationships with in the neighborhood still wanted to find a way how to connect. But we had ended up moving to Canada for a little bit.
Oh, wow.
And when you establish a relationship with your students and you want to keep exploring where they're headed, I kind of figured out a way to keep connecting with them. It was hard to coordinate like schedules. So I made a lot of like stop motion videos, and I've always been a fan of like box sets, like Duchamp boxes or like Diderot boxes and things like that that contain like a little universe. In this case, I made like a lot of lessons that could be used for multiple things. And so I would send these boxes out to my students, and because I had made these stop motion videos, which like I ended up doing like a lot of like I pulled these paper cutouts that I used to make my stop motion with, which was like a version of myself.
Amazing.
But like it was a lot of like I was imagining what a conversation with like Hilma of Clint would be with. I think I forgot where I put the other cutout, but I think at some point there was like a discussion with like Kandinsky and like how Kandinsky probably saw her work and started copying her work, I guess. I mean, there's like this theory.
Yeah,
And so then I like animated a little bit like all the paintings and kind of like
that's awesome.
like animating things and objects because like this theory of animism and like what would happen if all these things come to life, and I don't know.
So, you started this initiative in your apartment with your own kids. And then during the pandemic, it sounds like it went kind of remote and you were mailing out art boxes. Since being back in person, where are you facilitating the workshops now?
So I started collaborating after I came back. I just kept going to my friends' houses just to like do like some sort of like little pods where I would teach. Then I collaborated with like places in Ridgewood, like Forever Young Kids, and then with Clay Studios, like Art Shack in Bed-Stuy. And yeah, and I think anywhere that like let us, present the ideas and explore is, the place that I want to continue to be. And that like the kids, I think it's the cool thing about, I've always been like freelance, but when you become somewhere like stationary, you can actually see the progress of a child and like see how far they get to, and they start coming with like a line of work. They start developing a line of work, which is very interesting to see.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if you are seeing the same kids in multiple workshops, or is it kind of like based on location and who's available?
So I think it's just some of them come from like summer camps and then are returning mostly in summer, which is different than like when you work with after school programs, because with that they're just there because they know they're gonna be there because there's no choice. But with summer camps, it's more cool because then you have more time with them, and then also they want to come. They're conscious that they're coming to the program rather than like, well, I have to because I don't really have a say. I mean, of course, there's discussions about it, but it's more of like I really want to do this, you know?
Yeah. And I know the workshops are bilingual. I was curious about how you utilize both English and Spanish.
Yeah, so I would say it's like more like immersion. I would hope that I could um, speak for longer periods in Spanish, but I think it's also depends who comes to them that I would do more of in Spanish rather than English.
Mhm.
And I think there's also sometimes when kids don't know that you're going to be learning another language, they feel sort of like I don't know how to speak Spanish, and they feel a little bit like they don't know how to feel in that space where you're introducing words or concepts from words that are not familiar to them. And a lot of the words that don't signify the same in English, and a lot of the concepts that not necessarily translate because it's like sort of code switching, they call it now, but I mean, we call it Spanglish. Like that it's in both languages because it's both. And so I think it's just finding a way how to integrate it in a way that they don't necessarily see it as one or the other.
Gotcha. Okay. So it kind of depends on the specific audience that you're working with at a given time.
Yeah, and I think I wanted to show some of like the culture that, you know, I grew up with. For example, Day of the Dead is always like a big one for me, and the way how we approach death on its own. So I always find really like different access points to that particular celebration. And that's always a very important workshop for me in terms of exploring it in a bilingual way. So other cultures as well get to share the things that they do in their cultures to honor dead or like rituals or altars that connect with their culture. So I think obviously because I speak English and Spanish that I want to keep introducing it and sharing it and like bringing the voices up of you know artists from Mexico and you know sharing what we grew up with the rest of the world.
That's really cool. What are some of your favorite projects that you've done through Art Experimentos throughout the years?
I think I really liked because when we were doing the lessons, I created these like collectible cards and it had the picture of the artist, for example, Ruth Asawa, which we explored a lot with also. And then on the other side, I had, you know, like there's some trading cards that have drawings in the back or something like, I guess like Pokemon cards are like double-sided, but this one, I would have the students draw what was memorable from their learnings. And that way it became like their own personal connection with the artist that becomes a collectible, but it's not like you're gonna trade them, but just kind of you know, collect them for yourself and like going back to your learnings.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I see that recently you guys were making like board games.
Oh yeah. So I met this illustrator. Her name is Valentina. And we had been talking about collaborating for this like the longest time, at least like 2 years. And then I had been creating a curriculum in which each week was themed. And one of the weeks was called Ancient Games, New Adventures. And it's, you know, like when we were planning it, we were like, we could just dedicate our entire lifetimes to all of this exploration. We like stayed up late. We were like, what if we could do this and what if we could do that? And it involved a lot of like playing and then having the kids create their own game and their own dynamics for the game. And it's funny because I was teaching preteens, and preteens is kind of sometimes like hit or miss, like they're either really into it or they're like, nope, you know, or I guess in general. And their games were just all so varied. I think one of the preteens got inspired in the floor of the studio that had all these tiles, and then he just came out of the bathroom and this aha moment is like, I know what I'm doing. I'm gonna do like this dominoes with these tiles from the bathroom.
That's so cool.
And then we made boxes because you got to make boxes.
Yeah, duh.
So I
So,
think that's my recent favorite, I think.
yeah, I really loved the pictures from that. So they were learning about ancient board games and then making.
Ancient games in general, just like as the dynamics, because I feel like a lot of the times we think about games in a way that are games, but back in the day, they were part of their whole culture. It wasn't necessarily such as like a game. It was, it was part of like either royalty or in their like, I mean, like the rubber, el juego de pelota, and like, in my culture, it was like a life or like dead or kind of, matter. It was like really serious game. So I mean, back in the day, they were like very serious about these games. And I guess with time, things have lost context. Like snakes and ladders, it was connected to karma. It is connected to karma and like learnings and like the teachings of karma.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. And then we were thinking about, I don't know if it's like something that connects to New York, but that you're constantly having to either like move or get rid of stuff or things like that. So we were thinking about games that you carry with you. And then we did some sort of like jewelry, like so the ladders were like something you can put in a necklace, as well as like the snake so that you can just like take off the pieces out of your necklace and play with them in like a bandana that was the board.
Whoa, that's a cool concept. And they were making every piece, right? Like,
Yeah.
pieces were out of clay. It sounds like.
Some of them were out of clay, and then we integrated some like fabric aspects into the board game because we wanted it to be like something that you can just roll and carry with you or like wear as a bandana or something that was more like to carry it with you. But some of them did ended up making out of clay, so I think it was just a matter of every kid's like interests about their games that they made.
I also didn't realize until this conversation that you were working with kids as old as they are. I was assuming they were like elementary age, but you said you're also working with preteens.
I worked with ages. I mean, preteens is so tricky because I think working with preteens is feels a lot of like it goes really deep into your memories of your teenage years that you're most vulnerable. You know what I mean? You feel like you're back in time and all of a sudden you're a teenager.
Hmm.
So that's very like time traveling effect.
Yeah.
And then with kids, it's just like they're excited and they don't like overthink. And, either they go for it or then they find something else to do, but they're kind of like, still can go and do other things.
Hmm. Yeah. And it sounds like you're inviting guest artists to facilitate the workshops alongside you, or is it mostly you?
I think I hope to document these learnings from my collaborations with other peers that I've worked with that have explored ideas that can be shared, I guess, in the form of a printed matter. Yeah, so I'm an artist, but I'm also a curator. And so like these workshops, I would like in a dream world would love to say that I'm like approaching it as like Bruno Munari. Like there's workshops that get turned into books
Mm.
and because I like approaching these ideas in a way that you can continue to develop them into something that can be extended into many different ways to go. So when I make my lessons, I think I like to think about them as invitations. And then I just present like what's exciting, where it comes from, if it's like either an artist or like from like a Mexican artist or like my culture or someone else's, like another country or something. And then I present all the research, what's exciting, and then they just kind of like go for it.
Mm. Gotcha. I wanted to ask you, do you have any fun stories from working with kids? I'm sure you have 100.
That is a tricky one. I think the more like not, I don't know if fun, but disorienting is that you see kids in one context and then you like run into them in different contexts and then they see you like the way they perceive you it's really like they cannot place like you live outside a certain location or certain area that they know that you're there. So that's always a little funny to me. um
Are they like, hey, you're the art teacher?
yeah, when I was doing the videos, it was always like I was a celebrity because they saw me in a video.
Oh,
And then we would do FaceTime, and then they would be sort of like, wow, like I feel like that's why they would be like really into it, because they thought I had maybe like a YouTube channel or something, because they had seen me in this video format. So that is always funny. I don't know, it's just with kids it's just hard because these things happen like so quick, and the things that they say is, it's all the time.
hmm. Yeah.
So it's hard to remember one thing.
Do you have one kid personally?
One kid, like, yeah, my son.
How old is he now? I'm just curious.
He's 9.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, now he like gives me teaching tips also, like
oh wow. Oh, okay.
just
The
from observation. Yeah. I
apprentice surpasses the master. That's funny.
know, I know.
So, reflecting on your work with Art Experimentos, what have you learned about working with kids?
Um, I think that it's kind of, I don't know if it's like a philosopher that said like, I only know that I know nothing, like,
Oh,
like just when you think you have it all figured out, it just you kind of like are starting over. And I think that's a good feeling, because the moment they think they figured your classes out or they figure your method out, and then it just stops being like interesting to them. So I think being surprised and kind of challenged on your practice is like the best thing that can happen to you. I guess it's like the equivalent of like if you were a performer and still being like having stage fright before you perform is kind of something that you should always kind of feel, because that means that you don't know what's gonna happen.
yeah. I think anyone who works with kids would feel that.
Yeah.
And also, even if you feel like you've mastered one group, a different class is a completely different experience, and the dynamics interpersonally change, and yeah, you kind of always have to be on your toes. That's a great answer.
Thank you.
Do you feel like Art Experimentos has influenced your personal artistic practice?
Um, I think yes, because sometimes when I'm making like samples for something and I'm just like, doing something and I just want to show them like a demo or something, and then after I see the work, I realize that I really like it. And then I want to continue to explore it just because I was like just doing it on the spot. And I think for me in my like I work a lot with paper pulp and like paper, and I love like the layering, but like anything that is layering and yeah, it has a drying process, it can be, I guess, like tedious, or like the texture of things can, like, you kind of really have to love it. But when it comes to just like you have to teach, you do something real quick, just to do a demo, and then you realize that you could continue to explore this.
Hmm. Yeah. It from the outside, it kind of looks like Art Experimentos would be an outlet for you to like play with things in
Yeah.
a less serious way than if you're trying to, I don't know, than in your personal practice. It gives you like an outlet to be looser and explore things and talk about art with kids. Do you feel like that's been your experience, that it is that outlet?
Yeah, I think that is true. And then I think what it is that when you're an artist, you're thinking about like shows a lot, and
Mm.
like what are people going to do in response to your work, or like you're like creating in this like place of isolation, and you're kind of almost like guarding it a lot. And the projects that I've done as an artist, the most fun ones have been the ones that come from play. Like it's interesting because I'm sure you also might find this that with working with kids or like in youth programs, that you're a little bit like more free to explore ideas and not necessarily worry about the results or what other people are gonna think.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alva. This was really enlightening and super cool and exciting. And I can't wait to see what's next with Art Experimentos.
Thank you for inviting me. It's like really exciting to talk to you and hear your voice.
I know it's nice to meet you too. I mean, I don't know, we see people's work online and it's just nice to, yeah, get to talk to you face to face.
Definitely. Have a good night.
Bye.